Testing, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Mayor Beatty, can you hear me? Hear me?
I can hear you.
Good.
Yeah.
So I know in recent meetings with Zoom participants, we've had reports of not being able to hear very well. And I think there's a couple of factors in that. But before we start, I'm going to remind everybody to turn their mic on and speak right into it. So maybe message me or text me or let me know if it's going south, and I'll try to correct folks.
Okay.
And 10 minutes ago, we were set up to do the work session at the back of the room, and we got a horrible echoing issue. So we've pivoted, and the work session is going to be down on the dais just because we could make it work so quickly. But
Okay. Okay.
More tech fun. So
Yeah.
how's Oklahoma?
Beautiful. It's like 60 degrees and sunny, so I can't complain.
50 and wet. Yep, it's an El Nino. Hello, Rebecca. Mayor Beatty, can you hear us? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. You can hear us? Perfect, thank you.
Welcome to our December 19th work session. Today we will be talking about maintaining public art, and to give that presentation is Jordan Imla, our communications program manager, and Emma Sagor, our assistant city manager.
Thanks for having me. So this is kind of a preemptive conversation to some look to a budget ask later on, but just to kind of give some background and explain why we would be making a request and what type of a request it would be. So we are talking about the art that the city owns. That includes the most recent one, which is the Bing Cherry sculpture, which you can see in that. And then some of the other art that the city owns, which is like in the library currently, and then murals, which would be leaving like the 5-year easement window. Within that window, the artist has to maintain it, but outside of that, if we want to keep it, we would need it to be maintained. And then we also have a couple other projects that are triggering some art. The City Hall, this project has, and we would be getting art in this building soon that would need to be maintained. And then the parks projects, along with the JCB project, and the community center is also getting another mural. So there's a couple other projects that are coming online, and as we keep accumulating art, we don't want to get ourselves into a position where the art's falling into disrepair or looking bad. There's also a legal requirement technically that we need to maintain our art. It's the Visual Artist Representation Act of 1990 that was put into place just to make sure that like people aren't letting art either be destroyed or fall into disrepair, which would be potentially damaging to the artists themselves and then also like their reputation. There's also other requirements around that where you can do waivers to get around it too, but just as long as these things are in place, then you can start acting accordingly. For the policy is a pretty standard policy for art maintenance. I chatted with some other colleagues at some other cities in the surrounding area. A couple of them were like Beaverton, Lake Oswego, that have some pretty, also how we would like accept donations. That's been a question that's come up a couple times recently with like the library with the fountain that was out front that is now in storage. And then there's been a couple other pieces. I think it was kind of like the wagon train looking one at Milwaukie Bay Park that I think is actually maybe a bike rack, but nobody really knows like what we do with that. I think it's actually sort of damaged, but since we don't have a policy in place, we don't have like a life cycle. A lot of places will adopt a similar policy to like the library, like how long do you keep a book in circulation, or how long do you hold on to something, or how many times can it be repaired before you get rid of it, kind of a thing. And so this would help us do that, and then also have artists be on board too at the same time, so we're not potentially angering them where they're like, oh, where's all of my art, where did it go? And so really what kind of after that brief overview is kind of like, how do you feel about implementing something like this? How would you feel about this coming up in like a budgetary ask? And if you have any thoughts or feelings on how that would be funded. I know that there's some other, like Beaverton, for example, they fund theirs, or they actually don't have one in place. They realize they've been around for like their art program's been around for about 16, 17 years, and they realized they didn't even have an art maintenance policy. And so they're looking at trying to fund it through maybe like the % for art ordinance, like raising that and then using those additional funds to like maintain their collections. Lake Oswego just throws in, I think it's about like $80,000 to maintain like, I think it's 260 pieces of work. And so there's different funding mechanisms. Sometimes they tie it to like a nonprofit who might raise money, something like that. So that's kind of what I'm here today for, is just see your thoughts and how you feel about that type of a budget.
And the only thing I will add, because I guess my name was on the agenda item too, but Jordan did all the good thinking and work behind it, and I appreciate the presentation. As he said, this is a little bit of like one of those growing pains a city goes through as it gets to be kind of a big kid city and is acquiring more and a more impressive public art collection. This is just part of doing our due diligence. A lot of these maintenance asks end up falling on our facilities department, but we don't have built into our budget right now funding dedicated for that. So then there's the question of, does it come out of the art fund? Does it come out of the facilities budget? So as we head into the next budget cycle, we want to be really thoughtful about how we're putting this together and how we present it to budget committee and to you. So as Jordan said, this is kind of a preliminary conversation to make sure as we're developing that policy and that budget, that it's reflective of what you'd want to see and your priorities.
Councilor Massey, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. So, do we know, what facilities is doing now, what kind of level of effort they have going on, or how much of their existing budget is being spent on this? I mean, I'm kind of clueless about, what's happening now, and what's happened in the past.
We've kind of, in terms of what they're spending right now, it's mostly staff time to either help us like fix a sculpture pedestal, like maybe buy some like equipment to, for installation, getting like bolt shields and like different mounting systems, like repairing them or replacing them as necessary. But it isn't necessarily like in any of their job duties to maintain the sculpture garden or like other pieces of art around the city. So there tends to be some sort of kind of like, we got to figure out a way to do it. A lot of times like things will, maybe like the materials will come out of our budget, but then facilities will do the work to either like fix lights in the sculpture garden or like, we haven't had a whole lot of like damage that we've had to repair ourselves, but we had like, staff time required when like one of the people putting on the lights on the Christmas tree, they lowered the crane on a sculpture and bent it and destroyed it. And so, but we had to kind of facilitate how the insurance process was going to work for getting reimbursement to the artist. So far, yeah, it's a lot of it is staff time and then some materials, but we also haven't really been maintaining anything yet. It's just sort of, it is what it is. Luckily, like the sculpture garden is written in a way for the agreement that within the 2-year period that it's on display, the artist does the maintenance. But the other things, yeah, like the mounting systems and stuff have needed some repair here and there. However, it is kind of one of those things where people say, well, whose responsibility is it actually to do this work, or do we need to contract it out and who's going to pay for it?
Well, it really sounds like it's corrective maintenance, not preventive maintenance that we're doing now.
Yeah, right now it's been,
we're fixing stuff.
Yeah, it's reactive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Savinger?
Just a couple questions. Have we considered a percent for art, like ordinance or
We have
something
one
in the past?
Yeah, we
Oh,
have a
okay.
1.5%, it's art in public places ordinance. And so, yeah, that was triggered for like this building.
Sure.
And then, yeah, the parks projects are triggering it. The library was already sort of like historically out of it. Like it was sort of implemented when that whole process was going on to like get the bond and start building it. So, but they did kick in some money for art. So like, that's like the cut through walls have art in it, and then the portrait of Florence Letting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So usually those programs, the revenue generated is used in the facility that is generating that revenue. But do we have, like, is there enough that's in that fund to be able to pay for the supplies for some of the preventative?
No, not really. Like the library budget, I believe, was about 45,000 or so. But we kind of got above and beyond what we would have ever expected to get for that price in there now. And so there's definitely no budget for that. And then kind of the same with City Hall, like the budget is about 100,000, and the pieces of art that we're getting is going to come in like right at that.
Okay.
So there really isn't like a fund that's able to build through it. There's not enough public projects because it's only triggered for a public development project. So yeah, there's not enough revenue coming in to sort of maintain a maintenance budget.
Okay,
At the moment.
I see. So maintenance, maintenance aside, as we are thinking about growing, our city and our investments in arts, have we thought about a larger partnership with either the Clackamas Arts Alliance or even RAC for rotating exhibits and things like that in buildings?
We haven't explored that lately, but we could. Yeah, in terms of like trying to get more rotating exhibits that the city doesn't have to own and maintain. That
Okay.
could be a way to go for sure.
Okay.
That would, yeah, save some cost on maintenance.
Okay, I see. Well, I would be interested in exploring that. It looks like Clackamas Arts Alliance has an artist exhibit program, and they store and maintain and manage that. You know, and then we would say, like, on that wall looks like a great place for a very large piece. Do you have something like that in your collection? And I've worked with RAC in the past. They will just come in and they'll do the whole installation for you. And if you've ever walked through their storerooms, it's amazing to see, you know, all of the art that we do not have space for.
I've heard about it. I've heard it's nice, but I haven't seen it myself. Yeah, I've always kind of wanted to go check it out.
I know that doesn't solve the problem with maintenance, though. So
No, but those are great ideas, though.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think there is some, like, the Arts Committee definitely feels empowered to keep kind of finding ways to get more public art. And, you know, they've been really proud of, like, the Cherry and finding ways to get funding for it, but they don't want to, you know, have it fall into disrepair because there isn't really a way to keep it looking nice.
Thank you. I apologize, first of all, to everyone for being late, so sorry for that. I missed everything.
Oh, sorry.
But I caught the tail end, so, and just in reading, I get the idea of what we're looking at here, but what was was there an amount that you said that it would cost budget-wise for the maintenance?
At the moment, we don't have one. What we would need to do is an assessment. Most places either do annual assessments, or especially when they're kicking off a maintenance program, they'll do an assessment to just see what would be required and how much, like kind of give a ballpark figure.
Yeah.
We don't have much at the moment, so I would guess the budget would be pretty like low at the moment, but over the years it could need to be increased.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, like Oswego's was about $77,000 or
that's
so,
what
78,
okay.
but that was for like 260 pieces. So that's probably pretty high. But like another example, like so Beaverton repainted like an outdoor sculpture. It's just orange. It's called Singing Sky. It's in Beaverton City Park, if you've ever seen it, by their farmer's market. To repaint it, it was about $6,000, but you only have to do that every like 4 or 5 years, I believe, given the type of paint they're using.
All right. Thank you. I heard the numbers, and that's what you're talking about. You're talking about the other cities'
Yeah,
budgets.
yeah,
Okay.
that was the other cities.
Okay.
Yeah, so one of the first steps would be to do a proper assessment to see what it would take to maintain it.
Yeah, I'd be interested in, looking into that and following that up. Yeah. Curious. Thank you.
Mayor Beatty?
Sure, thank you. I knew that we had, since our first mural really was Chris Haberman's mural, which I don't even know if it belongs to us because it's on Milwaukie High School, but it has been percolating out there, I think, as an issue, this maintenance question for outdoor art, I think, for a while. I was a little surprised that your presentation includes indoor art. I would think the stuff that we put in the library and the stuff we put in City Hall should be just part. I mean, first off, it shouldn't have as many maintenance needs as outdoor sculpture and murals and stuff. And I guess I just thought those would be part of the facilities budget. But I do get the point that murals will need new protective coatings after so many years, and we're probably coming up on that with some of our murals. And then the other sorts of mounting that you're talking about, and just cleaning and, rust proofing or whatever it takes for sculptures. I guess the Cherry is our first permanent sculpture. I don't know, maybe I'm missing one, but, there's one there's some in like North Clackamas Park, there's one. Again, is that NCPRD's responsibility or ours? I do feel like we need some amount of budget to address the maintenance of the outdoor art pieces. And I hate to take it out of what we allocate to the art committee for murals and for outdoor art, but given what we know about our budget situation, that might be something we have to contemplate. I appreciate Councilor Stavengerd's thoughts about using the Arts Council, and, getting more indoor exhibits through sort of county partners, but that doesn't really address our issue of the outdoor art. And I do feel like we have to have a process and, have to have something for that, but I don't have any great idea about what that looks like.
Yeah, and you are correct that the indoor art that we have wouldn't need a whole lot of maintenance, and it wouldn't require a whole lot of maintenance going forward. I mean, there would be some cleaning, but cleaning by a professional who knows how to clean art, and it would be pretty low. But it's kind of more looking forward to like the next few years as more pieces are owned by the city, and also kind of like you said too, we actually don't know all of the art that we own and who technically owns art in North Clackamas Park or Milwaukie Bay Park or wherever to see. Because as far as I know, none of it's really been maintained since I've been here. I mean, they kind of just look the same as they've always had. So, and then, part of that ownership too, and creating a policy would be how to also decommission it too if you wanted to ever get rid of it.
Quick question. We have MAW right here that is a wonderful asset. And I just went to the open house recently and learned that, they can all the students take regular classes, but the product that they submit can be, so like instead of writing a report, you might compose a song or paint a picture or something along those lines. But I wonder if one of their students or one of their classes might be interested in helping with an inventory of art in the area.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Inventories and assessments can be kind of costly sometimes, like a few $1,000s at least. So if they could do it, that would be great.
Maybe they could get credit for it.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good idea. Definitely help us understand what we have though.
Well, Councilor Massey took my question, so I don't have anything. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. But if you do have any other comments or questions, did you want to say something? Sorry.
A lot of it was covered through the dialogue. I just wanted to say thank you. These were really great ideas. We'll follow up on the partnership ideas. I love the partnership with the high school too. And again, just to reiterate, you asked great questions about the 1.5% for art. I think the other thing in there is language in that ordinance around maintenance. But as Jordan said, we haven't had many projects that have led to the use of it. And as we do, we're realizing that might not be enough to both cover the procurement and then the ongoing maintenance. And so I think Mayor Beatty hit the nail on the head that what you're probably going to see when we come back in the budget process is a little more structure around the public art fund, how much of that might be for procurement of new art and how much for maintenance. But I think you've given us really good food for thought as we develop that proposal.
So in terms of next steps, I think what would be really helpful is to get an idea of maintenance projections. What has been, maybe if there's a way to scan, maintenance that's been conducted so far, maybe the ages of the pieces that we know in advance, and what a starting point for a fund would look like. I think this budget is really tight, and it's hard to put something like art up against staff.
Yeah.
For
sure.
And unfortunately, we're facing questions like that. But if we have an idea of what a starting point would look like for maintenance and maybe even expanding the project, we could look at some grants and maybe bring revenue in that way.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I don't believe it would cost too much to get started, but like a couple years down the road, maybe see some increases. But I think at the beginning it wouldn't be too costly, and hopefully, something like a grant or something else could cover a lot of that. That's a good idea.
Mayor Beatty's hand is raised.
I'm just curious as to whether there's been any conversation with the Arts Committee about this.
Yeah, we've been discussing it. I mean, it was especially discussed once the Big Cherry was commissioned, and then as it's been finishing up, like, well, what happens to it now? Like, what if somebody backs into it or tries to deface it or something? And so they've had questions, and they did also have questions after we came to council and got the clarification on being able to use the public art funds for sculptures and murals. They're like, well, if we keep getting them, what's going to happen with them? And I know that they don't feel like they have the ability to raise enough funding and like sustained funding to keep maintaining it. And so they were hopeful that the city had some sort of budget to kind of help with that, or at least supplement it in some way, and maybe they could help get some grants too.
And the other thing we have discussed, Mayor, I don't know if we've discussed this with the Arts Committee, but one of the bullets on Jordan's slide about the policy is you might put in there, you know, how are we going to bring in people with expertise on art maintenance? Because it really is a field in and of itself. And some other places then have, you know, added into the bylaws that one person who sits on the Arts Committee could have that art preservation and maintenance experience. So there's various ways I think we can also be exploring that as a body to make sure that accountability and oversight piece gets built in.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate all the insights and ideas. That was great. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you, Jordan. All right, next up, we have the Neighborhood Hubs discussion being presented by Vera Colias, Senior Planner, and Adam Haro, Assistant Planner.
Good afternoon. Sorry, thank you. I haven't been at this desk yet, I don't think. Good afternoon, Council. Good afternoon, Mayor. Vera Colias, Adam Haro, here to talk with you about the Hubs project and give you an update on the project. We're going to be, both of us will be presenting this afternoon. Just want to set the stage a little bit, and then I'll pass it over to Adam. This is phase 2 of the Neighborhood Hubs project. Phase 1 was back in 2019, 2020 as part of the comprehensive plan process. This phase 2 piece of the project had a few different sort of marching orders for what we were hoping to accomplish here. We wanted to refine the hub's locations and types that were identified in 2018 and 2019 that resulted in a draft report. So we wanted to kind of make sure, do some ground truthing and make sure that we still had the correct set of hubs. We wanted to explore economic development programs with our economic development department and really lay out tools, programs that could support new and existing businesses and residents within the hubs. And then, of course, we wanted to review and refine the development code based on what we heard from folks in the hubs and from the public so that we could implement a first round of code amendments to help move the hubs forward. Over to you, Adam.
All right. Also my first time in this new room. So phase 2 outreach had a lot of different components, but it was primarily organized around trying to identify property owners, business owners, community organizations in Milwaukie that want to do things that are hubs-like activities, but have barriers that they're facing. So we started out doing a business and property owner survey. We went within a quarter mile of every single hub that was identified in our 2020 report. There were 13 different areas. We sent a postcard to every business and every property owner of any kind of like commercial property, or if they were in a hub boundary and their property had an outline around it. 22 different folks participated in that survey. We got some leads for some interviews, and we did some canvassing and outreach to meet with other property owners. We did one-on-one and sometimes two-on-one interviews. There were 23 different folks in 18 different meetings in almost all of the hubs participated in that process. We also went out to the neighborhood district associations. We presented to all of them, including historic Milwaukie. Even though there's not a hub in historic Milwaukie, there's a connection, I think, to how the city's approaching, economic development in downtown versus the hubs. And so we had that conversation as well. Before the workshop point began, which is kind of the biggest push that we had for outreach, we talked to about 122 or so folks in that first phase. And then we went back out and a lot of people participated again in the process. So it's hard to give you an exact number of unique folks, but that's all to say we did 6 different neighborhood workshops. We brought proposed code changes that would help remove those barriers that we identified earlier in the process, and we brought them back to the community, and they reacted, they shared their questions and thoughts about the project, and we compiled all of that into an online workshop as well. So we had the 6 in person and the 1 online, and overall about 83% of support for the proposed changes on average, about 10% on neutral opinions on them, and then another, and it depends on each one, and we'll show you a little bit more later, but a lot of support, a lot of engagement in those workshops, and we did a lot of pilot articles, so we were keeping the community informed, knowing that there was a lot of broad engagement in the last phase of the project, and even though we were focusing in on engaging certain populations this time, we knew that the community overall really wanted to be informed. So we did 5 different pilot articles throughout the year, informing on project process and progress. And then we also presented to the Equity Steering Committee in March and followed up with another report back to them for their 11/30 meeting, so the November 30 meeting last month. And yeah, that's I think we're ready for the next slide. So some of the top takeaways of our engagement with property owners is that, and with community more broadly, you probably got it from the numbers, there's a lot of broad support for the things we've been talking about and very little opposition. Property owners are interested in doing things on their properties, and community members are interested in seeing a lot of those things happen. We talked a lot about certain types of uses that folks wanted to allow, and greater flexibility when it comes to development. What kind of food, retail, activities, events, how people want to change the home occupations code so they can do different things with their business, and also design standards. Are our design standards sometimes getting in the way of and being more costly for development? We talked about grant and loan programs and how those would be very useful for a lot of different people and a lot of different purposes. Many of the businesses and property owners saw a value in that, and community members did as well, from the NDAs to sort of that community project placemaking angle as well. We talked a good bit and heard a good bit from businesses about how, we don't really have a small business alliance or association here in Milwaukie, and it was suggested that the city kind of help create one or be a partner in that. We talked about a process for new hubs to emerge and what are the potential mechanisms to allow hubs to be created where they don't exist now, and knowing that the history of our land use system is kind of what created the hubs that we do have now, is really a lot of zoning that got put in place many decades ago. So certain neighborhoods really catching on to I don't have a hub. To reconsider and expand the existing hub boundaries, so we have a lot of places in these hubs where it didn't necessarily make a ton of sense to us picking up the project later in community reacting to it. Why are there single family homes in this hub boundary, for instance? So there was a lot of conversation about maybe being looser with those boundaries and reconsidering, what we consider part of the hub. We also talked about connecting the hubs and the importance of our transportation system, serving them, for them to really develop and grow. They have to be connected, both for people walking or biking or driving. So that was a big piece as well. And I mentioned earlier, there's been a broad interest in site improvements. So making the changes at the convenience store that the convenience store owner wants to make. Like they might want to put a food cart out in the parking lot. They might want to put a table for people to eat, things like that. There are some interesting sort of zoning obstacles when you start to change the use of your business in that way, as it stands currently. So I think this is where you're taking over at the 2 slides from now, right? Okay. So we talked a lot about prioritizing which hubs we're focusing on. We did get some feedback throughout this process that 13 hubs is too many, and we really need to focus where the opportunities are to make things happen. So we did a pretty extensive process. We to refine those boundaries, and we thought about also the hub types. There were 6 or 7 different hub typologies in the previous iteration of the project, and we really wanted to focus in and kind of narrow that down. And some of the types just didn't seem to really fit with the aspirational lens that the community has been viewing the project. So we talked also about developing criteria for evaluating the hubs, pedestrian access, commercial intensity, how much population lives nearby, things like that. And we revisited those typologies. So I'm going to kind of move on into the next slide, I think, here, to show you some of those criteria. So the hubs refinement criteria, we kind of broke them out into placemaking and community building criteria. So, were there opportunity sites, places where people could activate or have a history of activation? How close is it to other amenities like parks that can be activating for the neighborhood? We just had a discussion about art here, and I think that is another thing that kind of played into the, are there opportunities for that? What are the existing bike connections and pedestrian connections? Are there, bike-friendly streets and protected bike lanes? And we tried to kind of rate those, the different hubs based on all of those criteria. And for community building criteria, the Neighborhood District Association interest in the particular hub and support also from the wider community for a particular hub to be a focus and a priority. Also, property and business owner interest within the hubs is really important. That's kind of what we were basing a lot of our engagement on in this round. Focusing on, what are there potential for pop-ups? Are there potential opportunities for community meeting space? Are people using it in that way now? There are a few spaces in Milwaukie, including the Campbell School Community Garden, which is already acting kind of as a hub and a community space for folks. So we used kind of all of those criteria. We gave things rankings, and we had a consultant work with us to kind of identify from an economic development perspective, what are the possible strategies that might work here? Is there opportunity here? And we also had the community's voice in that process to give us that additional information. Let's see how we're good for. So this is our map. And you can see it's got a lot of circles, and it's meant to be, you're meant to kind of sit with it for a little bit of time and kind of soak it in. So I'm gonna hopefully explain to you how it works. So those thin blue line circles that aren't filled in and don't have any orange on them, those are hubs that were not prioritized for zoning changes that we are working on as part of this project. And also, in many cases, they're not a really good opportunity for a hub, like the Family Dogs shelter on Johnson Creek Boulevard. And then the Wichita Town Center is already commercially zoned, has a lot going on. You've got basically a vacant property in Linwood, and then the North Clackamas School District office, which might be a good opportunity for pop-up events, but which, they're not planning to sell it or develop it or anything like that. So it has limited opportunity. So we kind of put some of those hubs a little bit to the side as we're focused on code amendments. You'll notice the very sort of solid blue dots. That's Ball Michelle Park and the Campbell School. Those are community hubs. Those are places where communities are already gathering, big things are happening, but there's not a lot of commercial activity, not a lot of zoning. changes that we can really do there to help those hubs. And we did talk to the property owners who owned those properties in those areas that were, had potential for development and did not find interest in development. So we, kind of moved on from prioritizing them from a commercial and zoning perspective. And then these others with the orange outline around the blue dot, those are the sort of priority and the short-term priority hubs, and those that are receiving some kind of zoning change. You'll notice in the very bottom right of this map, the 7-Eleven in Linwood, not a very safe area. Community doesn't really love it as a hub, but we thought that we would potentially change its zoning to help with some of that. If it were to ever develop, maybe some of those issues with the transportation system there could be addressed. So focusing in, we can go across to the bottom left, Island Station, the Trolley Trail hub. We've got some proposed code changes that will impact that one. We've got some proposed code changes that will impact the Milwaukie floral site. So we're proposing a rezoning there. We've got, and Vera's going to talk through all of these specifics for each of these, but I'm just going to kind of give you the overview. There's a couple convenience stores that are in the neighborhood commercial zone, Sunny Corner Market, and also the Milwaukie floral site is being proposed to have its zoning changed in addition to Roswell Market. So there's some zoning changes there as well. And then for the neighborhood mixed use zone, we have a proposal to add certain uses in there as well. And that would apply to 32nd and Olson and 42nd and Harrison hubs. So that's the very, very quick overview of kind of the thinking on those as priorities and kind of how we came to focusing on those. And now Vera will tell you, what we're proposing and how it went with community.
I'm going to channel Laura here and pause for a second and see if there are any questions before we get into some of the more specifics of what we presented during the workshops and what we heard from folks. Are there any questions so far?
I just have a quick question. It looks like the Roswell Market Hub is one of those that's prioritized, but I didn't see the Roswell Market listed as one of the interviewees. Was there involvement with the property owner there, the business owner?
We tried to reach the business owner there, but we had trouble reaching them. And I mean, we've heard great things about the market from community and how it is a really great space. It has a lot of access to certain types of groceries that maybe aren't at every convenience store. And I know folks at Clackamas County, they're doing a convenience store focused outreach project around nicotine products and trying to reduce those in convenience stores. And they had trouble fully getting a hold of Roswell Market too. So it sounds like they're just very busy and didn't have the capacity to respond.
But I think what we certainly, as kind of the next part of this project, when we move into the actual code amendments, we'll try to see if we can get some direct, if we can walk in there and start trying to talk to, we tried that, and maybe we'll be able to get a little more communication with them as well. Okay. So what you see on the slides are the boards that we used as part of the workshops, and this was also part of the in-person or the online survey as well as the in-person workshops. Again, we heard basically a little more than 85% of folks that participated both in person and online generally supported the proposed zoning changes and the creation of the economic development programming. This first concept is talking about, and so what we did, let me back up for just a second. We sort of had a sense of how we thought, rather than present code to people, we're asking questions of people that we will translate into the code piece of it. And so this question is framed around allowing more uses in the CN zone. So the CN zone, or the neighborhood commercial zone, this is the zone that would that is the Roswell Market is zoned CN, Sunny Corner Market, the Little Blue Store on Washington Street is the CN zone. And this is also the code that we were pulling Milwaukie Floral into as well. So very limited commercial uses are permitted in the CN zone, and they're all a conditional use. So that makes it really difficult for folks to either start anything new or change anything that they might already have. So the questions were asking about allowing more types of uses in this kind of a neighborhood commercial zone, maybe allowing some mixed use. Would we allow restaurants, some evening activities, perhaps food carts or outdoor seating to come up to the sidewalk? Those are the those kinds of ideas that we can then frame into actual code language. And what you see on the slide, we had sort of strongly support down to strongly opposed. And what you see is for any one of these, we had, fewer than, 5 or 6, in the opposed, and everybody was either neutral or strongly in support of the idea of broadening the allowed uses in that CN zone. And what we've sort of the idea here from the CN zone is actually to change that zone and create another, what we haven't named it yet, but a small mixed use zone. So we kind of want to keep it in with where we already have our general mixed use zone. We have a neighborhood mixed use zone, and the idea is to turn the CN zone into a small mixed-use zone and follow the same categories. The code itself right now is also pretty poorly organized. It's a lot of words and not enough charts, and so we're trying to make it easier to use as well. So we would be pulling these folks or these properties into this a little more permissive and with these kinds of uses that we are hearing that folks would really like to see in their neighborhoods. The neighborhood mixed use zone, or the NMU zone, this is the question that would apply to the 42nd and Harrison area, at sort of the Chapel Theater, moving east towards 42nd Ave. There are a few properties there that are still residentially zoned. The Chapel Theater functions as a community service use, again, very limited in what it can do, and generally would require, for the most part, likely planning commission review for anything that they would like to do there as well. So the idea is to pull the existing NMU zone west down Harrison Street to capture a couple of extra properties from that corner at 42nd and Harrison. This is also the zone that the Milwaukie Cafe hub, that's 32nd and Olson. That's a very small, the hub has been identified as kind of that corner, that Milwaukie Cafe corner, but the NMU zone is a corridor or a portion of the corridor of 32nd Ave. It does have a weird boundary, doesn't go on both sides of 32nd Ave, and that's something that we are considering as sort of part of another phase of this project, or sort of the next phase, which we'll get into as well. That would be talking to a lot of single family home owners and understanding what that kind of a zone change would mean for single family properties that are there. But the idea here is to allow, we're broadening the kinds of uses here, like theaters and private event spaces and that kind of thing, as well as the current, which is not currently a specifically identified use, and so we want to make sure that things like the Chapel Theater or small community theater spaces, wherever they might want to locate in the NMU zone, that's a permitted use. And then we also wanted to ask the question about allowing bars and cocktail lounges is something that might be permitted. It's currently a conditional use. The NMU zone is pretty specific that if you're a restaurant that also serves alcohol, you're permitted, but if you're just a bar that might have snacks, that's a conditional use. So we wanted to understand sort of if that's a kind of use that folks might be more open to allowing, as opposed to when we first did the NMU zoning in 2015. That was a pretty specific piece of discussion that we had during those public hearings. And so what we heard was a little bit of, some opposition to the idea of late night kind of bars and that sort of thing. But for the most part, what we saw was support for opening up those uses a bit more in the NMU zone. And then finally, the CL zone, or the limited commercial zone. This is the trolley trail hub. This is the 7-Eleven area. These are the questions here. Again, wanting to broaden some of the uses that are allowed in this CL zone. This zone does have some limitations on size of some commercial spaces, but it's not like the CN zone where everything is a conditional use. So we do allow some things by right. But we wanted to take a look and see if we can open that up a bit more, allow mixed use, for example, some lodging, just kind of wanted to tweak that, the use category. And again, what we saw here was that, yes, folks are generally in support of wanting to open up the uses in the CL zone as well. Food processing, things like catering companies, breweries, distilleries, that sort of thing. Again, indoor recreation or theater, playhouses, really trying to kind of open up some of the uses a little bit. Bicycle repair, things like that aren't specifically listed. And where we landed, because we saw, and we were hearing so much support here, what that translates into from a code perspective is that the CL zone, those folks will probably, what we will be proposing is that will likely, that we'd like to move that into an NMU zone as well, and sort of upzone those CL properties into an NMU zone. So part of this process is trying to make sure that that we've got code that supports the kinds of uses that folks want to see, but that we also kind of we have a lot of commercial zones that are just little one-off properties, and we'd like to kind of streamline that as well. And if it wasn't clear, and I just want to kind of make sure that small mixed-use zone, or that CN zone that we'd like to change, the Milwaukie floral site is currently a moderate density residential zone. That's what it's zoned. It's a pre-existing non-conforming use there right now. So the proposal is to rezone that property to this new mixed-use zone. We've been in discussion with the property owners and trying to figure out kind of where's the boundary of that zone, because that property goes all the way to the river, actually, from the street. It's a very long but narrow property. And so we're sort of thinking with them, what's a logical boundary for that zone, because it's probably not the whole property. It's likely kind of what you imagine where the store is and the greenhouses. There's sort of a natural kind of topographic change there as well that might make sense for where the mixed use piece would be. And certainly with all the middle housing opportunities as well, the remainder of that property still has a lot of development potential, even if it stays as RMD. But again, we'll be talking with those folks as well to make sure that that map change makes sense and is supportable by everyone. And then finally, we did ask folks about economic development in the hubs and sort of the kinds of tools that we think make sense sort of where we are and how we'd like to propose that. And we wanted to just make sure that folks understood what we were proposing, what we're thinking about for economic development tools. Of course, we have a community development director here who can speak to a lot of these things as well. But the idea of allowing or having funds that might be available for tenant improvements or seating, landscaping, those kinds of things, promotion of hub activities, pop-up events, temporary uses, maybe some signage or something like that. Maybe some marketing assistance or education as well, promotion of businesses and events, maybe some kind of a passport program in the hubs where folks could travel around. We started to really get a lot of fun ideas about what might happen there. And then again, as Adam was mentioning, this idea of the citywide small business alliance, it's not just downtown, it's not, it's all of the small businesses kind of working together to connect folks and just let everyone know what's going on everywhere. So there were a lot of really great ideas, and we definitely heard a lot of support for wanting to help the hubs. So the next steps that we are proposing as part of this phase is that we will be back before you with code and map amendments to reflect the things that we've been talking about. There's also, of course, the TSP that's happening right now that has very specific hub improvements that are built into that. Laura, the planning manager, of course, is working in both projects, and part of the idea was that yes, the TSP is certainly a long-range planning document, but there are also very specific projects that get identified in that to then translate into the capital improvements plan. And so the hubs project and the TSP are talking to one another, so that there are very specific things that are identified as part of the TSP program that are directly, that are intended to support hubs activities. So like pedestrian improvements, intersection improvements, that sort of thing. So those are linked together. And then an economic development toolkit that we've been working on with, we have a consultant that's been helping us sort of really tailor an economic development toolkit to our scale of community and resources, and things that really, that are strategies that really make sense for hubs and for Milwaukie. We can certainly have a whole encyclopedia of things, but we wanted things that really were tailored to what we were looking for here. And then we have been, as part of all of this, we're hearing all kinds of great ideas and things that we definitely want to do in a phase 3. So while sort of the code amendments and all this stuff is happening, we're going to be gradually moving into a phase 3 for the hubs, where we'll be exploring community service uses like church properties that have a lot of other things that want to see happen there. So we want to take a look at our CSU code and see if there are some opportunities that are also hubs related in a lot of ways. Those kinds of uses are in neighborhoods, and if there's a way to create a little more activity there through our CSU process, we want to take a look at that. Certainly our temporary uses and events code, because that's a really great way to pilot things and see how they might work. So we want to make sure that that section of the code is broad enough that we can kind of try some things out without committing to code, but see if that's a way to have some pilot ideas. We've been hearing from folks about home occupations. We have a pretty broad home occupation or home-based business kind of code, but it's not really about your business sort of being front-facing in the neighborhood. It's really supposed to still be a house, and so we would like to explore the idea of accessory commercial uses or something that might happen in the neighborhoods on a small scale as part of a home-based business. That might be a nice way to seed something that might evolve into something bigger, but we'd like to have an exploration of that and see how we might take advantage of our home occupation thing and see if we can maybe stretch that a little bit to see if we can provide some opportunities within the neighborhoods, particularly in a neighborhood like Llewellyn that doesn't actually have a hub in the boundary. So are there some ways that we can provide those opportunities within that neighborhood? Area plans, I know Laura mentioned that, I think, as part of our work plan discussion that she had with you folks a while back, but doing maybe some kind of strategic area designs or plans that sort of puts a little bit of investment in some of these hubs, like seating or planters or that kind of thing, to kind of show some investment. But I think part of that is taking a look at some of the boundaries, particularly the NMU zone on 32nd Ave. I think it might want to be on both sides of 32nd Ave, but there's a very specific piece of outreach that needs to happen there because that would affect a lot of existing single-family homes, and we want to make sure that folks understand what that could mean for them if that zoning changed. And then, of course, really developing those grant and loan programs through the Community Development Department and getting the resources, like implementing the toolkit as part of that phase 3 process. So as part of all of this work, we've created a lot more work for ourselves, but it's really pretty exciting, I think. But very happy to answer any questions. Maybe I'll leave it on the proposed next steps for now, and entertain any questions that you might have. Thanks very much.
Councilor Massey?
Thank you. Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Adam. Wow, this is a lot. I will admit that during the comprehensive plan of all the elements that we considered, hubs was for me, the hardest thing to get my arms around. One, trying to define the definition of a hub to begin with, and then once you had a definition, how you achieve it. And I'm still a bit perplexed about how we get there. And I appreciate the work that you've done on the zones. I think that's obviously something that has to be done, but I think changing the zones without, serious, attention to transportation and infrastructure and economic development, I'm not sure about changing the zone. If you build it, they will come. I'm not sure that'll happen with just zoning changes. I like that you've necked down the number of projects. Did I get it right that it's 5?
As the sort of the priority
Okay.
hubs for now, yes.
I will tell you, if anything, I would say go even further down, because I just, we don't know what we don't know, and my thought is that rather than changing code for a lot of places and everything like that, we kind of neck this thing down to, a pilot project, or see what's going to work, what's not going to work, or something like that. And that would frustrate people, because we've had all of this outreach and said, hey, these are things you might get, and that kind of thing. So I say that with some trepidation, but I think half a dozen is a big workload, and I want these to be successful. And I'm just, my thoughts are that maybe let's see if we can get 1 or 2 right before we proceed further. I didn't have a question, I just had a lot of comments, so I apologize for my rambling. Thank you.
We'll go to Mayor Beatty. You're muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry. I'll hold my comments and start with questions. When you say Roswell Market or Sunny Market or Milwaukie Floral, are you talking about just the property that sits on, or some kind of a boundary of properties around it?
It's a good question. I'm sorry that wasn't clear. What we're talking about is that actual property. It's not
Okay.
surrounding properties at this point, at this time, no.
Okay. And then going back to the CL zone and upzoning that to NMU. So your 2 examples of that were the Trolley Trail Node and the Linwood Harmony. And I guess in both of those, I don't see a lot of potential. The Linwood Harmony has terrible access problems. That intersection is, that's just going to be a right in, right out kind of business, whatever it is. But just because of the nature of that intersection, and it's not our intersection to control. And there's there've been long-term talks about grade separation and rebuilding that intersection, but that's obviously that's obviously still pretty pie in the sky. But I'd hate to see someone invest money there and then we come along and then tear up the intersection, and that maybe affects their investment. So I guess to me, and then on the trolley trail, the parcels are just so small that I guess I was, and the way the roads cut across them is such that I didn't see a ton of potential there. I thought we might see more redevelopment there, but we really haven't. So I guess I'm wanting to know, what do you see that could happen there that makes sense to you as rezoning it as neighborhood mixed use?
Well, I think certainly, as with any of these hubs, property owner interest is a big piece of this. We can't make things happen, but we can sort of try to set the stage for something that might be interesting. It's conceivable that one of those properties might redevelop or turn, want to change their use into something else, or maybe a building comes down and a 2-story building gets built. It's more about, I think, trying to see, can we create a foundation of opportunity there? And again, with any of these, I mean, nothing might happen, for a long time. But the idea of, at least at this stage, to get the code set up, that there is more flexibility or more opportunity in these sites, was sort of the idea, at least at a base level. And then see if somebody wants to aggregate properties and come in and do something. I mean, you never know. Certainly in the NMU zone on 32nd and Olson, we have a vacant site that's been sitting there for a while, certainly. I'm told that plans might be coming in at some point for a building on that site, but I don't know. I haven't seen anything yet. Certainly with us, we're not allowed to require off-street parking. That's a big development standard that has been taken, off the table for folks that could open up some opportunities. I know that that's a controversial thing, but at the same time, it's something that might open up some potential for some of these properties. So, I mean, is a dramatic revitalization something that I foresee in the short term? Probably not, but I think it was important to take a look at the code and open it up some more so that it can be partnered with potentially some economic development funds or some infrastructure improvements, or something that it's at least, the stage is set for something that could happen there. I know some of these geographies are pretty limited, and we were very careful, certainly, to make sure that we were managing expectations for everyone, that we're this is one part of a bigger kind of calculation of how things might change in some of these hubs, and it might take time, or it might never happen, but we want to at least move it forward in a way that we can start, hopefully, to get there. So to your point, Councilor Massey, I know that there's a lot happening here, and I think the 5 that we identified were the ones that we're able to focus on from a code perspective, and we'll see what kind of property owner interest we get in being able to move some of those forward.
Yeah, and I would add, regarding the trolley trail hub, I think there's a lot more potential for things to happen there than at the Linwood hub, which is why we made it a priority hub. It seems like, in the near future, there aren't plans to develop it. We talked to the businesses there. When we were talking to the Island Station NDA in the building that Two Sisters is in, there was a little bit of a discussion of this is actually kind of an old building. Is it a redevelopment opportunity? I don't know, but that was brought up. Folks at the meeting suggested, well, why don't we add the multifamily across the street to the NMU zone? Why don't we add the Grange to we haven't been able to have those conversations with those property owners because, we recently got that suggestion, but I think people are thinking too at the community level, where's the opportunity to take it a step further so maybe something does happen.
Well, I do think, I think those are good questions that the neighbors asked there. The 2 properties on the north side of 22nd, the River Roadhouse, and then that business that's got all the fencing and the vans. Those buildings were rehabbed fairly recently and had I don't know what their investment was, but a sizable investment in the last 5 years. The building the Two Sisters is in, I agree, is maybe ripe for redevelopment, but it also has the the light rail kind of ride overhead. And so what its envelope could be and everything, and, what the setbacks are now, it's probably non-conforming and all of that. I don't see a ton of potential there, I guess. I'd love to be wrong about that. Anyway, let me move on. I watched when you guys briefed council in August 22, I watched that video, and one of the things that was brought up there vis-a-vis the 32nd Avenue was Hillside, and there was some projection at the time that Hillside's redevelopment was going to include some mixed use fronting on 32nd, and I don't know if we ended up with that actually being part of the Hillside plan or not. is it?
At this stage, what we will see is, for the first phase anyway, it's likely to be the 32nd Ave frontage will likely not have commercial businesses, but it will be a commercial sort of, the appearance of the building will have sort of a storefront design on 32nd to sort of create that streetscape. But the uses in there will be a bit, they'll be more resident focused, but they won't be residential units, I guess, if that makes sense. But it doesn't
Okay.
look like that they're likely to get tenants that are, commercial tenants, sort of public.
So housing services type.
Correct, right,
um,
yeah.
Social services, housing services, okay.
Yes.
That's good to know. There was one other question. I guess that was all my questions. I think you guys did a great job in terms of the rankings. I do share Counselor Massey's concern, and I said this at that August 2022 meeting, that even though we talk about the city's not, has limited tools, I do worry that we're creating expectations. And I just want to remind everybody that we still have vacant storefronts in downtown. We still have vacant storefronts in Milwaukie Marketplace. I don't know if we have any vacant in King Road right now, but it took King Road 10 years to really fill up. It took North Main 10 years to really fill up. So I do worry about the cannibalization as we create new commercial areas. So I do share some of Councilor Massey's concerns there. Yeah, I guess I'll stop there for now.
Counselor Kazarbani?
Thank you. Thank you, staff, for the presentation. It was very well done, and I appreciate the staff report as well. I love the idea of the neighborhood hubs. I really do, and I'm a huge supporter of it. But to echo Councilor Massey and Mayor Beatty, the approach, because we do have this, the issues that we have economically. I'm curious if we start with maybe the top two as opposed to the top five, right? Like Councilor Massey was suggesting. And maybe what we do, because we're having a hard time bringing in businesses right now, what if because it sounds like we have quite a few home businesses. What if we tailored those two hubs, or what if we found the hubs that had more home businesses and made those hubs places for home businesses to perform their business, and see how that generates, and if that brings, you know what I mean? Like, we support local, well, that's about as local as you can get in supporting businesses, as opposed to bringing outside businesses. We're actually allowing, home businesses to now thrive within their own communities, and allowing them to make an extra profit, right? Especially nowadays. So I'm curious if maybe, I see where there's the potential for this, but maybe we need to scale it back and make sure we get it right. Because that's the other thing. I don't want I don't want the codes to eat each other, and I don't want there to be issues when it comes with the TSP, because I do think that things need to be ironed out in this, and then needs to be incorporated in the TSP. I know they're talking, but I feel like this has to be worked out prior, right, first. Because it's just it's different. It's so unique. And again, maybe we start off with the neighborhood hubs being that for neighborhood businesses, and allowing those businesses, when I was at PSU, in the business building, actually, they have a storefront that every month gets switched out to like a new student-ran business or idea, and they get to lease that space for free to highlight. Like when I was there, one student had it for a month for their shoes. They were designing their own shoes. There was a clothing store in there, right? And this was in the business building. So maybe if we did something like that, where you can have the neighborhood businesses, the home businesses, be able to highlight their businesses, start there, see what that brings, especially if it's like coffee shops, pizza windows, these kind of things, and see where that goes. And if there's an appetite for more, and if there's an appetite for expansion, and if that does bring in other businesses as well in doing so. But I just see that we're doing this, but there's also a need for these home businesses. So I'm just trying to see if there's a way to connect the two and maybe allow them to thrive and flourish within their own neighborhoods before other businesses are brought in. Because I feel like the other businesses need to fill in downtown and a lot of these other corridors, right, that we have that are missing. Maybe the neighborhood hubs just need to start as neighborhood hubs.
To kind of, I guess, respond a little bit to the piece about home businesses, we did engage our home occupations. The challenging piece about it is that our home occupations currently are not necessarily the types of businesses you might see emerge eventually if we were to legalize, you say, like a pizza window in your front yard or a food cart in your yard or a, front-facing porch coffee shop or a salon where you make half your house a salon and the other half is, you sort of live in. And so those types of businesses currently exist sort of hidden in our neighborhoods. So some of them are there, not the food-based ones, but the salon or the massage therapist, et cetera, they can operate, they just can't promote, they can't have the outward appearance of a business as it exists. And so accessory commercial uses are something that we've been looking at, in particular because these storefronts in these hubs that we're talking about, there's a big barrier to how much capital you need to move into one of those. And accessory commercial uses are a way, especially if you own your property, that you can invest a smaller amount of money than it's going to take for your business to move in to a commercial space somewhere. You're also investing in your own wealth because you're building a structure of some value on your property that when you sell it later will be of value possibly to another homeowner who might come in. So it is a very interesting and compelling strategy. It's also a much bigger conversation, I think, than we were able to come with that kind of code now. So it's good to hear the interest in the home-based business angle and how can we cultivate those, because we've been seeing a lot of interesting work in other cities around that.
Yeah, thank you. Because it's that's seems to be a more popular thing now, the home-based business, obviously. My other thing is we got an email from the Planning Commission Chair Sherman, and I'm interested in hearing from in those work sessions to hear about some of those things being brought up, because he brought up some interesting points in making sure that we do get it right, similar to what Councilor Massey said. So I'll be looking forward to hearing about that and the engagement behind that as well. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Stavanger.
Well, I'm really excited about this. This is one of my favorite areas to geek out about. So I appreciate your work, and I have tons of ideas, but I'm just going to highlight a couple of thoughts. I like the idea of starting with 6 hubs, because they're not going to grow in the same ways, right? They're not all going to need the same type of capacity at the same time. We might actually find that one hub focuses on business development because there are anchor businesses there. We might find that one hub really needs a placemaking element, and we'll build that out, and that would be an opportunity to showcase what placemaking can do in our neighborhoods. We might find that there are hubs that, very small improvements can enhance the transportation infrastructure that's in that area, and then we find more people walking and biking, and the activity comes in that way. So I'd much rather start with 6 and have a menu of options that the hubs could really grow into. Not that they would have to, go 0 to 60 on every single thing, but that they could pick and choose. And it makes sense in terms of the economy of scale for zoning changes, that, if you see and you've already grouped certain hubs with similar attributes and characteristics, then I would encourage starting with 6. Other thoughts, I'm wondering, there's a really technical data avenue that my brain went down. I'm wondering if you did analysis of the number of businesses or home occupation businesses that exist within that buffer and what those look like compared to the rest of the hubs. And if you did, I'm also kind of wondering if we have access to Tapestry segmentation data from like community analyst software that Esri has, where we can look at the cross sections and the characteristics within those hub neighborhoods, the demographics, and begin to sort of put together, economic development strategies or placemaking strategies from there. So let me stop there and see if I'm already singing a tune that you're singing.
Yes, I think we are. So we did map our home occupations, and we did some demographic analysis. Adam worked on that as well. So I think what we can do, we don't have it all prepped,
Sure.
but I think I'm hearing, tailoring strategies, create almost like a profile a bit of the hubs to kind of really suss out paint a picture or create a profile for each of the hubs and sort of figure out what is there, who is there, that kind of thing, and sort of figure out how do we tailor what they might need from an ECDev standpoint or something like that based on that profile. So we have those data points. I think what we'll need to do is kind of, we don't have all of the Esri cool stuff, but I think we can certainly put together that kind of data, because I think you're right, that would be a really useful way of sort of analyzing what we've got on the ground.
I think, the business community often will use data like that to determine whether they put a grocery store in a certain community, or whether a community is appealing. And yet those of us that live in the community are like, of course we're appealing, just bring your grocery stores, bring your coffee house, but I'm really interested in using those same tools for the public good, so that we're able to look at the data and see what sort of incentives we might need to partner up with, so that we can be just as appealing to bring in anchor stores. And I think if we have Esri as, for our mapping software, then we should be able to even just purchase the community analyst data, they provide it at a zip code level on the Esri website, but you can get census tract. And then, it goes deep. It's all the Big Brother data, if you have your grocery card, that you get your 10 cents off a gallon, everything that you buy is already in that database. I'm probably scaring people at home. So, but that creates an economic profile and an engagement profile too. You get to an idea of what the ages are of people who live in your community and what they like to do. And, I think that Milwaukie is really vibrant and diverse. And I think that these hubs could play a huge part in bringing our communities literally together. So I am really excited about that. And then the last thing that I'll talk about tonight is, we have an urban renewal area that covers a pretty large geography. And it's a heavy lift to start a new URA, but micro URAs are doable. And the city of Portland, to our north, has experimented with these as prosperity initiatives. But I've worked with a few of those in my day job, and it's really been an amazing opportunity for community organizations, for businesses, for residents that live in those prosperity initiative areas to have the benefits that come with tax increment financing and urban renewal areas. And so, that might be something that we look at and maybe a readiness scoring for those 6 that we start with. Let's maybe throw that in as an option. And we have maybe one of the 6 that wants to try out a prosperity initiative. I think that we're at a point in time where, especially with the TSP planning, those of us that are doing the TSP planning are going to be looking at opportunities, and we are thinking with a range of 10 to 20 years in the future. We are thinking about putting the infrastructure in place so that Milwaukie can thrive, and these hubs are part of it. So I think that the time is actually now, and it's really exciting to hear your update. Thank you.
I just have one question, and I'm not going to belabor what everyone's talked about, what Councilor Massey has said, because I agree with it. But in all of your outreach, were there any major concerns or suggestions from property owners or businesses about this?
I don't think so, not really. I mean, property owners, they were either interested or they weren't, but if they weren't interested in their own property doing something, they were fine if other properties did. And some were like, I don't really want to put a food cart in, but I'd do it for the city. And so we had a lot of a really big range of levels of interest, but yeah, no real opposition to the project outright, even at the workshops either from community members.
No, I would agree with that. I think certainly I won't speak for Kelly Keener, but at Milwaukie Floral, they're all, yeah. I mean, what they're doing there is, where it's sort of, because it's a pre-existing non-conforming, it's kind of, they really want to do more there, and so they would really like to see this happening. I think in a couple of other, like Milwaukie Cafe, Shay doesn't own the property, right? He's a tenant. So he's really excited about this stuff, but he also doesn't control the property. So, certainly from any of the property owners, or folks that were sort of involved, they would like to see as much flexibility and opportunity as they can get. So, yeah.
Were there any suggestions from them as well?
Yeah, I mean, a few examples. So some business owners, property owners are facing barriers. And so one of the things that we're proposing is to rezone Chapel Theater. It was a community service, or is a community service use today. So they have to stop operating. I think it's at 10 p.m. They can't have a lighted sign. They have to have a shared parking agreement with the church. And if they were to ever lose that parking agreement, they'd have to have another modification and land use process and lose their approval, basically. And if they want to change any aspect of their business that's not in that original approval, they've got to come to us and wonder about whether it needs a type 1 or a type 3 review. And so since it's been kind of established as a CSU. So that's one example. There are other examples as well. I think about sort of an example that's kind of like outside of an existing hub, which I think is an interesting piece for this project to keep considering with the community service uses. Milwaukie Lutheran Church on Lake Road, they have sort of lower numbers of people visiting the site by car these days. They have a lot of space. They're thinking about how they want to redevelop the site maybe, or to serve the community needs. Maybe it would be housing, maybe it would be a food cart part, maybe they're just kind of in this process of trying to figure it out. But currently they can't do that. They've got a kitchen that's a commercial kitchen that they don't use all the time. And community members have been talking about, small business owners, I would love to see a commissary kitchen. And so there's that opportunity rising up, but actually you can't really do that. And it would be a major modification to that community service use and possibly not allowed outright in the code. So there's a lot of things like that that are coming up along the way.
Yeah, and I think, for example, part of the discussion that we were talking about, this idea of a small business alliance, that came from some of these businesses, that trying to, downtown has, is an entity kind of in and of itself, but there are small businesses all over the city, and they can really help each other and cross promote and all that sort of thing. So that was something that we definitely heard from those folks. And I think, not to belabor sort of this idea of, flexibility, like let us do stuff, and code isn't always, really good about figuring out, understanding kind of new things that are happening, where somebody comes in with an idea and we're trying to make it fit into our code. And so we'd like to have code that allows for creativity for the businesses, and that's what they'd like us to help them with. So that's definitely what we heard quite a bit of, I think, too.
Thank you. Mayor Beatty? Oh, Joseph?
Yeah, I had a big question that I meant to ask before that I forgot and it came to me. But before I ask it, I do want to say I am generally supportive of the changes for Chapel Theater and for Milwaukie Floral, because I think we want to support the businesses that are out there doing the work now. I'm a little concerned about the idea of changes that allow them to go past 10 because they're both quite close to other residential uses. So I will be curious about that in the code package that comes forward, but I'm generally supportive of giving them more flexibility. My big question is this. The Planning Commission, when we had our joint meeting a few months back, called for the idea of upzoning King Road from 42nd to Linwood. I think we need to decide whether we're going to do that before or along with this package, because I think that would change how many hubs make sense, and that would change my thinking about the hubs. So I wanted to know what staff's thinking is on the idea of upzoning King Road.
You take the first.
I think that's a discussion, frankly, that our planning manager needs to be part of, because that's a big work plan item to do that. I don't think the King Road sort of corridor study or whatever, I didn't just name it, that's what it would be, is something that would affect our work plan, I think. It's a good question. We know that the Planning Commission brought it up, certainly, but I think Laura needs to chime in on that as an effort that we do. I don't disagree that that's something that we need to kind of figure out, what are we doing with it? But I do think that the hubs code changes, I mean, they're for the most part, but for Milwaukie Floral and Chapel Theater, they're already zoned a commercial zone. We're just trying to kind of, tweak them a bit more, either upzoning them or kind of creating this new thing. So I don't know that not knowing whether King Road is happening means that we shouldn't be doing what we're doing right now at this point. But I think when Laura gets back, given that that's a question from council, then that's something that we'll need to talk with her about when she's back in the office.
Yeah, and I'd agree. You're muted, Mayor.
You're still muted, Mayor.
Sorry, I just was going to point out also we have a project to, repave and do sidewalk, do bike paths on King Road. And I think we need to resolve this question about, I was intrigued by the idea, I have to say. But anyway, I mean, we really ought to resolve that before we, rebuild King Road as well as the hubs question, so.
Thanks, Mayor. I think you're right. That was a big question. It is, I think it would be it would slow down this project quite a bit at this point if we went down that road to create a corridor plan and do studies. I agree with Vera in the sense that I don't know that it would take away from what we're proposing so far with the hubs. But I do think that's a conversation that council obviously you're more than welcome to have and give us direction. If there's consensus there, then we can go down that road. I would say it is separate from hubs. There's been so much work to this moment right now that it would be, I think it would just take away from a lot of the momentum and community expectation just to have the next phase complete. So those are just comments. Obviously, as far as direction concerned, I'd love to hear from your colleagues as well on that.
Yeah, and just one thing to add, we did look at something that the city of Portland recently created called the Outer Southeast Community Plan, as we were sort of looking at the hubs, like what should be the approach to hubs. It is a much bigger conversation than we've had the capacity to have at this point. So knowing that there are these other examples and knowing that as infrastructure improves, that ends up being the better place to put your multifamily housing or your mixed use down the road, it makes sense from just that perspective, but we haven't really been able to have that conversation with the community or fully internally.
With that, are there any more questions or comments?
I did have a comment before that question, and that's essentially just want to thank Vera and Adam for getting behind. I think Councilor Master, you're right. This is a project that is really requiring, I think, us all to kind of be a little stretched in the idea of changing suburban development patterns and creating commercial nodes where historically they're there, but they're also maybe not there for us. And so I just would say I appreciate actually the conversation that's taken place, both as far as adding or keeping or maintaining the amount of hubs we have, as well as prioritizing, because I think it's worth, private investment follows public investment, and making zoning changes is kind of low-hanging fruit as a public investment. And so I think there's some good things to be said for just making it easier in the future to do any kind of development. With that said, what I would ask this council to consider is in the next phase, especially as we move towards the TSP, and this project will inform the TSP, is let's prioritize maybe those one or two, because when we talk in CIP projects, we're talking lots of money. So, and I don't feel comfortable saying which hub is one or two, but if you all could help definitely direct that, that would be extremely helpful for staff to get behind. And because I love the idea of, I got really excited actually just hearing the idea of prioritizing even what we're throwing out here today, because I think that's one thing that we often take big bites, and I'd love just more strategic bites. So just want to say thank you for that conversation tonight and plant that seed.
Thanks, Joseph. Just real quick, I just wanted to, you read on the upscaling for King Road, you mentioned that it wouldn't, like, it doesn't have anything to do with the hubs. Is that what you're, not you, but somebody mentioned, I'm not sure who said it, separate issue or?
Just that certainly these zoning changes that we're proposing for the hubs, that can happen independent of the King Road corridor, whatever that ends up being, I think. I think these are changes that are necessary to, to support what's happening in those hub locations now. But, so I don't think that we need to wait till we figure out what we're doing with King Road. That was all. I think this can move forward, and that can be an independent project.
Thank you.
And one thing to add to the conversation around sort of King Road is that at that 42nd hub area, there is actually quite a decent amount of high density zoning. That it's not mixed use zoning, but it is high density zoning. And in the housing production strategy, there's the eventual goal of raising that density in that zone to accommodate more, be more economical for developments of that type. So.
Thank you. I appreciate all your comments.
Thank you for your presentation. And with that, we will see everybody back at 6 o'clock.